Hey YouTubers, this is the Gold Standard 0924 coming at you with another video for you guys today. So this is going to be my review for WWE Survivor Series 2002. The show was held at the Madison Square Garden Arena in New York City. And overall, I gotta say, I definitely really enjoyed this show. I recently rewatched it on the WWE Network, which surprisingly enough was unedited. It definitely really holds up just as much as it did when it originally aired. Just a lot of good stuff happened during this show, and a lot of historic stuff as well, most notably being the main event, the first ever Elimination Chamber match, and that would go on to become a yearly tradition for many years onwards. There was also the debut of Scott Steiner, who was just coming off the heels of his run in WCW. This was just about a year and a half after WCW had closed its doors, having its assets being purchased by the WWE or WWF at the time. And speaking of the name change, this was also be the first Survivor Series event to be held under the WWE banner. Earlier that year, the World Wrestling Federation got sued by the World Wildlife Fund, and due to some of the circumstances involving around that, it would later be what we now know as World Wrestling Entertainment. The more I start to realize 2002 was such a really huge transition period because 2002, the early half of '02, kind of had shades of the Attitude Era. And then you look at like later half of '02, when you had the debut of the brand extension with the brand split, certain wrestlers would be on one show, the other wrestlers would be on the other show. That would go on for many, many, many years, and despite a little hiatus, eventually WWE reinstated the brand extension, which is still going on. This pay-per-view really delivered, and also unlike the previous Survivor Series pay-per-view events, where you would have the traditional 4-on-4s and 5-on-5 matches, Survivor Series '02 did something pretty innovative, and it's something that I really wish that WWE would at least try to do something different every once in a while. As much as I enjoy some of the bragging rights concept that they've been doing, at the same time, it just kind of feels very formulaic and a little repetitive. I think every once in a while they should really, change up things a little bit every year. In this case with Survivor Series '02, you had a variety of different gimmick matches, but at the same time, they would be implemented under elimination rules. And for instance, being that the first match that opened up the show, the six-man tag team tables elimination match, which had the Dudleys, Jeff Hardy teaming up together to take on 3-Minute Warning and Rico. And there was also the triple threat elimination tag for the SmackDown tag titles as well. So there's some examples of how they managed to diversify some of these matches while staying true to the Survivor Series format that's been known for doing. The tables match, I might as well just go out my way to go a little more into detail regarding about that. So basically the Dudleys, now this would be the Dudleys of Bubba Ray and Spike as opposed to Devon. Devon would be on SmackDown, while the rest of the Dudleys were on Raw. So they were starting to bring back the Dudleys, or at least reunite them. You had Jeff Hardy, who, they were teaming with the Dudleys, and it's pretty interesting the more I start to realize that, being that Jeff Hardy was part of the Hardy Boys, and, he along with Matt, fought Bubba Ray and Devon at the very same venue where they had their tables match. So I thought it was actually pretty interesting as far as the callbacks are concerned, because there were actually a notable callback to that spot that they did at Royal Rumble 2000, where Jeff Hardy did that Swanton bomb onto one of the members of 3-Minute Warning. And so I thought that was actually pretty cool what they did. And, you also had Rico, who was one of the contestants of American Gladiators. Now, he would also be in WWE for a few years as well. And, all these guys just really went balls to the walls and definitely really delivered. Spike Dudley would be the first one eliminated when he tried to go for the Dudley Dog, but 3-Minute Warning along with Rico would use a triple team move to eliminate Spike. Yeah, so speaking of 3 minute warning, I definitely remember some of the stuff that they did when they first debuted, and Eric Bischoff was coming in as the Raw general manager, and and then every once in a while, Eric Bischoff just glances over his watch and he would utter the infamous quote, "Did I just say 3 minutes?" And then Rosie and Jamal would all come out and attack their targeted opponents. So yeah, they actually it just felt like a very um, promising tag team that just didn't really seem to get off the ground. I mean, they would be around for about a year, and then I think Jamal got released, and then Rosie would go on to have his success with the Hurricane and winning the tag team titles here and there. But Jamal would, however, return to WWE as Umaga and go on to win the Intercontinental title a couple times. Unfortunately, like Rosie, however, both guys are sadly no longer with us. And I definitely thought they had some very unique chemistry here. It's just a shame that they just weren't able to stick around for as long as they could have been. And they probably could have been a good antithesis for the Dudleys and kind of be a force to be reckoned with if they were booked correctly. I definitely really enjoyed this match. Devon would interfere in this match and help Bubba Ray eliminate Jamal to win the match for him, along with his brother Spike and Jeff Hardy. Definitely a really great moment, and it's great to see Bubba Ray and Devon back together again. I mean, it was just a great match, and I know Bubba Ray would go on to have his success as a solo act a couple years later when he would go on to do when he uh, and Devon would both be in TNA, and they would team up for a few years, and then Bubba would turn on Devon. So there was a moment in time where they tried to experiment on Bubba Ray and Devon as singles wrestlers, and unfortunately that didn't pan out the way they wanted. It's also a pretty good idea that they reunited at this time. It definitely really made a great moment. And then we have is the Cruiserweight Championship bout with Billy Kidman taking on Jamie Noble. Now, yeah, I almost forgot about the Jamie Noble Nydia pairing because I remember Nydia was on Tough Enough. She and Maven were like co-winners of the first season of Tough Enough. Billy Kidman, being a former WCW wrestler, he had been in the company for about a year and a half. Jamie Noble was also another WCW wrestler as well, but he would also make his debut in WWE. Yeah, so I definitely really enjoyed this match. There wasn't a whole lot of build up here, just Kidman just racking up some wins over Jamie and a series of non-title matches on SmackDown. So yeah, I definitely really liked this match. And there were some moments where it feels like Jamie Noble was gonna win it, and the match ended when Jamie Noble accidentally bumps into Nydia. Kidman would, go on to hit the shooting star press to get the victory and to become the new cruiserweight champion. Definitely a very fun match and just a lot of good fast-paced action. I mean, I definitely really like this match. And then we have is a no holds barred match, and this was for the women's championship. We have Trish Stratus going as the champion taking on Victoria. Now, yes, I really enjoyed that. What was that? That psycho gimmick that Victoria used to have, and oh man, I just really missed just how over she was during this time. And I don't know if she wasn't using the tattoo theme music at the time because I know that song was really huge. What was it? All the things she says. But I don't think she used it yet, or maybe WWE might have edited it out, or whatever the case may be. It definitely reminded me just how amazing Victoria was the first few years she was in the company at that time. And there was actually a pretty good story that they told here about how, Trish and Victoria were, posing as models during the time, but then the powers that be decided to choose Trish over Victoria, and she starts going through this like sort of mental disorder that she was going through, and she's like enraged, and she has this sense of like jealousy over Trish, and how she's kind of like their go-to it girl for WWE, because considering that Trish was pretty popular during this time period as far as her role in the women's division's concerned. She was just starting to really blossom and come to her own as a singles act as opposed to being a valet when she was, managing Test and Albert. Really, Trish has definitely stepped up to the occasion by the time we get to 2002. And she had been winning the women's title belt here and there, and she'd be on and off again holding that belt. And she just came off of a pretty hot rivalry with Molly Holly. This would eventually lead into a match at Survivor Series. And definitely some really cool stuff here with a lot of emphasis on weapon usage. And, Trish Stratus tried to go for I think it was one of those trash can lids. And then Victoria just smashed Trish Stratus with like a weapon. I can't remember what it was. I think it might have been like a sledgehammer or something, but I could be wrong. But it was some sort of weapon that she used. Just all around great stuff here. There was a little bit of botch, and that might just be a minor nitpick, where Victoria was trying to go for looked like the glam slam finisher that Beth Phoenix used to do, and Trish Stratus tried to counter that with the bulldog, but it just kind of as far as the countering goes, as far as how they were able to connect that move, and it just kind of felt very off and sloppy in a way. Victoria, however, did manage to pick up a victory where she basically what happened was that she used a fire extinguisher or some kind of powder on Trish, and then she ended the match with a snap suplex, which is very unusual for a way to finish off your opponent. And it was when I first watched it for the first time in years, and I was like, "What?" Victoria ended a match with a suplex of all moves. I don't think she was doing the Widow's Peak at the time, but I could be wrong. But I did not see Victoria make any attempts to do the Widow's Peak. But yeah, this was definitely a really good match. Even though there was a little bit of the initial, or I guess you could say the precursor to the Women's Revolution that you see now, but there was a little bit of that during '02 and '03, and a little bit in '04 before the start of the Diva Search. I definitely really enjoyed this match. And then we have the WWE Championship bout. Now, the more I start to realize as far as the pattern, as far as the card was with Survivor Series, other than the six-man tag team tables match, everything else involved the championship belt in some way, shape, or form. And the WWE Championship bout between Brock Lesnar and The Big Show was no exception. Brock and Big Show, as far as this is concerned. So this was just coming off the heels of Brock's successful title defense against The Undertaker, the infamous Hell in a Cell match that they had, and then the SmackDown after No Mercy, Undertaker and Brock Lesnar both shake their hands in mutual respect. And then at some point, when Taker was celebrating, Big Show attacked Taker from behind and just basically threw him off the stage, just writing off The Undertaker for a few months. And then Brock Lesnar started stepping up to the occasion and started to show a little bit of signs of a baby face. But he wasn't all the way there yet, but he was kind of more of a tweener heading this event. And then Paul Heyman, being Brock Lesnar's agent or manager, has these sort of doubts that Brock Lesnar wouldn't be able to dethrone The Big Show. Now, The Big Show was just coming off of his run on Monday Night Raw, and he would get traded over to SmackDown, and basically raising all sorts of hell and giving Brock Lesnar the toughest challenge of his wrestling career at that point. So that was kind of like the focal point of the build leading into this pay-per-view. And the match actually did not last that very long. Brock Lesnar just did everything he could to wear out The Big Show, just relying more on strategy. And there was moments where the referee was knocked out, so there was a lot of emphasis on chair usage, and Brock Lesnar just doing everything he can to, like I said, wear down The Big Show and looked like he came so close to winning that match. Brock Lesnar tried to go for an F5. He had the match won. The referee was coming out there to make that count, and then Paul Heyman all of a sudden just grabs the referee by the leg. Brock gets so infuriated. Brock's just betrayed, and he just doesn't understand what's going on. So Brock goes on to chase Paul Heyman. The cat and mouse chase goes on. And this buys Big Show enough time to regain his composure, attacks Brock Lesnar, hits him with the chokeslam on the steel chair to get the victory. So Big Show would become the WWE champion, much to the chagrin of Brock Lesnar. So this match, like I said, did not last very long, but it still got the job done. Now, originally this was supposed to be Brock versus Hulk Hogan, and this was going to be a rematch where Hulk Hogan would make his return, and Brock Lesnar was going to intend on going over Hulk Hogan in the rematch that they had back in August. If you remember, Brock Lesnar did that bear hug on Hulk Hogan, and Hogan passed out and he was like busted wide open. Since Hogan refused to job to Lesnar once again, so that rumors of the speculated match were scrapped. So they brought in the Big Show. And yeah, I think the more I start to realize just how randomly built that this match was, like Brock Lesnar didn't really have a whole lot of opponents to work with, so they had like Big Show from Raw to come over to SmackDown just to kind of give him, Brock Lesnar an opponent to face. And Undertaker was taking time off. Big Show won the WWE title, and Brock would just go on through the next several months, feuding with Paul Heyman, and Big Show would eventually hold that belt for about a month before dropping it to Kurt Angle, thus leading into Lesnar versus Angle for WrestleMania 19. Then we have is the triple threat elimination tag for the tag team titles. Edge and Mysterio taking on Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit taking on Los Guerreros. So basically around this time, the tag team titles originally were intended to defend on both Raw and SmackDown, much like what the Undisputed title was. But much like what they were doing with the WWE title that originated as the Undisputed title, those certain title belts would be exclusive to one show. So in this case, since the WWE title would be on SmackDown, then the regular WWE tag title belts would be on Monday Night Raw. So the belts from Monday Night Raw were the real tag team title belts that WWE had been using for the longest time. So then they had to come up with this tournament to crown the new SmackDown tag team title belts. So you had Kurt Angle and Benoit, who would be the first to win the tag team title belts for SmackDown. Angle and Benoit would have their series of matches with Edge and Rey Mysterio. Edge and Mysterio would win that 2 out of 3 falls match on SmackDown. As far as Los Guerreros is concerned, because Eddie and Chavo would also be paired up during this time. They have their friendship going on with Chris Benoit, given their friendship. I remember there was a match between Kurt and Chris Benoit where they were like determining who was like the better alpha male, and they both just couldn't stand each other's nerves. And even despite the fact that they were tag team champions, there was a couple moments where they had Los Guerreros as far as their involvement in their rivalry with Kurt and Chris, and then Edge and Rey Mysterio also have their thing going on with Los Guerreros. Yeah, so they had this triple threat elimination tag bout, and yeah, the match actually started off really hot, and the crowd was supporting Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit, and unfortunately they would be the first ones eliminated. The crowd booed. The match was still pretty good, but you could really tell that something just kind of died down as far as the momentum of the match, but it was still a pretty good match. It was definitely given a lot of time, really. Edge and Mysterio would lose the belts when Eddie Guerrero locked in the lasso from El Paso on Rey Mysterio. So they would go on to become the tag team champions. So I definitely really loved this match. The SmackDown 6 era was just one of my favorite periods of SmackDown during that time, and just really showcased the athleticism, and it's definitely the brainchild of Paul Heyman, who was the head writer for SmackDown. It definitely really showed just how much chemistry that the 6 wrestlers had when they came to facing off one another. So I definitely really enjoyed some of the stuff that they were doing. And then we do get a little bit of a breather. This was more of a segment with Christopher Nowinski, who I completely forgot about, but I did remember he was one of the contestants on Tough Enough. And he had this little gimmick where he was just so arrogant, full of himself, and they were kind of playing off of his educational background as an A-list scholar from Harvard. And then the crowd often than not would often chant, Harvard sucks. Definitely a wrestler that had a lot of potential, but unfortunately his wrestling career was cut short due to brain concussion, unfortunately. Matt Hardy also came out, especially with his, by this point, he was debuting that Mattitude gimmick. You know, like, Mattitude V1, nah. Um, so I definitely like that gimmick or that iteration of Matt Hardy. It seemed like people were getting behind Matt Hardy until he decided to basically trash the fans and all that sort of stuff. So Scott Steiner would just come out and clean house and put himself over by making a statement. He even gave both Chris Nowinski and Matt Hardy some belly-to-belly suplexes. I definitely thought it was really cool. Unfortunately, Scott Steiner's run in WWE would become one of the biggest flops in the company's history, especially debuting with so much hype. And then, he would have his match with Triple H, which ended up stinking up the joint, and then he just never really recovered from that. But yeah, it's just really a shame that things just didn't turn out great for Steiner as far as his run in WWE. I don't know if he would have been booked a lot better if they just had him debut as a heel, because I think a heel Scott Steiner was a lot more effective than bringing him in as a babyface. Now I understand that he was, pretty over during during this particular night when Madison Square Garden and the crowd was, very receptive of Steiner. And maybe that's just a hindsight thing, just to kind of say maybe Steiner would have worked best if he had came in WWE as a heel as opposed to as a babyface. Like some of the stuff that he did in WCW in '98, '99, and even in 2000. I mean, those promos that he was cutting were just very effective and very to the point, and he just had some very good charisma, even if he did have his fair share of speech impediments. But at the same time, he just made those promos sound effective, sound real, sound so cutting edge. But it definitely really felt like Scott Steiner could have done more if he had been in good shape. At least for this particular night, I thought that he came off to a strong start. But yeah, it was a pretty cool promo for what it was. Then we get to our main event, the Elimination Chamber for the World Heavyweight Championship. Triple H defending his world title against Shawn Michaels, Booker T, Rob Van Dam, Chris Jericho, and Kane. Now, Triple H, he was awarded the World Heavyweight title around the time that the Undisputed title would eventually be exclusive to SmackDown and therefore be rechristened back to the WWE title. And given that Raw has no world title, what they did was that Triple H, according to Eric Bischoff in the promo, he said, especially in a match where Triple H won a number one contenders bout to challenge the winner of Rock versus Brock. So then, basically, Bischoff, as a reward, would hand Triple H the world title. You would think when it comes to creating a world title, you would think that maybe they could have done some kind of like tournament or a battle royal to determine the champion in this situation, and they just decided to just hand Triple H the belt. I know, granted, like I was explaining about how Eric Bischoff said that you were the number one contender, but now that's been taken away from you, so I'm just going to award you a world title. So there, we're all settled. Let's move on from there. So I don't think that was the right way to introduce your top tier title belt. I know Triple H's title reign kind of really started the infamous Reign of Terror that was going on from 2002, 2005, when Triple H would all often than not be on top, and he would cut all these long ass promos about how he's the game and how he defied all the odds and proved the naysayers wrong, and saying all this endless babble that you just wish that he would just get straight to the point or just finish his promo right then and there. During this time, it just, oh my gosh, I mean, it's just so bad. As far as coming off of the Attitude Era where title belts were just changing hands in a short amount of time, this would be the early seeds of the Reign of Terror that you see with Triple H since making that heel turn in the summer of '02. So he'd be defending the belt against 5 other competitors. Shawn Michaels would also make his full-time return to the WWE as an in-ring performer. He had already came back 3 months prior, but that was meant to be a one-off. But Shawn was healthy enough, and he would be making his official comeback here at Survivor Series, the same venue that he and Triple H had their street fight 3 months prior. Some pretty cool stuff that they did. So there was actually another spot where Rob Van Dam, starting off this match, he would do like a rolling thunder outside the ring. Rob Van Dam did a 5-star frog splash from the top of the pod onto Triple H. And that move alone, that really kind of pissed off Triple H in a way. There was a spot where Kane threw Chris Jericho onto a pod, which is a pretty huge deal. And I think they did a similar pod spot where like Goldberg speared Jericho through a pod. I could be wrong, but yeah, he would. There would be a similar spot that involved Jericho getting thrown into a pod or smashed into a pod at the next Elimination Chamber match that they had. But yeah, there was another spot where Kane just threw Jericho right through that pod. RVD would get eliminated. Booker T would also follow suit. Yeah, there was like a little team up with Triple H and Jericho where they would, where their partnership would allow Kane to get eliminated. It was like Triple H doing a pedigree. Jericho did a lion salt, having him get eliminated. And so eventually it came down to Shawn, Jericho, Triple H. Jericho would get eliminated. I definitely really liked the chemistry that Jericho and Michaels had. I think this was a little bit of a sign of what would have eventually culminated into their match that they would have at WrestleMania 19. There was actually some pretty cool stuff that they did together for the short time that they went at it. And Shawn would, I believe, Shawn would eliminate Jericho, and it would come down to Shawn and Hunter, and they would just go back and forth, and Shawn Michaels just being all bloodied and battered and bruised. So these guys were just tearing the house down. Triple H went for a pedigree. Shawn kicked out. Triple H tried to go for another pedigree, but then Shawn just counters it. He quickly goes for his Sweet Chin Music. 1, 2, 3. Shawn Michaels becomes the World Heavyweight Champion. The crowd cheers. The confetti just flies below from the rafters, and Shawn would hold the World Heavyweight title, which would be what would turn out to be his last world title run that he would have in his career, and a pretty short one. His reign will only last for a month before dropping it back to Triple H in that 3 Stages of Hell match at Armageddon. So this is basically a great moment for Shawn to come back and win the first Elimination Chamber match. So overall, Survivor Series '02 gets a thumbs up. And just a lot of good stuff that happened, a lot of moments, with the Dudleys, with Bubba Ray and Devon reuniting, Brock Lesnar turning babyface, Scott Steiner making his anticipated debut, and Shawn Michaels returning and becoming the World Heavyweight Champion. Definitely a really great night. I really kind of wish that Survivor Series would be kind of more of, not the same, but every once in a while, like do something like very innovative with their the way they do elimination matches, like in this case with Survivor Series '02. You got the Elimination Chamber match, you have the Triple Threat Elimination Tag, you had the Tag Team Tables Elimination match to kind of go with it. I really wish they would go back and do that kind of stuff every once in a while. So that's pretty much my review for Survivor Series '02. Let me know what your thoughts are regarding about this pay-per-view down in the comment section below. What were some of your favorite matches? Thank you all guys for watching. Until next time, this is the Gold Standard Caesar 924 signing out.